Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to lose everything, not just your money or your home, but your very identity? Picture this: Sarah Mitchell, 7 months pregnant and blissfully married, walks into her doctor's office for a routine checkup. But what starts as a simple appointment unravels into a nightmare of betrayal. Her husband, David, he's not who she thought, and Vanessa Chen, the mysterious business partner. She's been living as Sarah, stealing her credit, her medical records, even plotting to take her unborn baby. As secrets spill out, Sarah discovers a web of lies, fraud, and danger that threatens to erase her existence forever. Will she reclaim her life, or will the master manipulator win? This is stolen identity, shattered trust, a gripping thriller of deception, revenge, and a mother's unbreakable will. You won't believe the twists ahead. Stick around to the end for the shocking conclusion. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her maternity blouse one last time before entering Dr. Williams's office, her heart fluttering with the familiar excitement that came with each prenatal appointment. At 7 months pregnant, she still marveled at the miracle growing inside her. After years of trying, this baby felt like the culmination of everything she and David had worked toward in their 15-year marriage. The waiting room buzzed with the usual energy of expectant mothers, and Sarah settled into her favorite chair by the window, watching other pregnant wives chat excitedly about nursery themes and baby names. She pulled out her phone to text David, knowing he was probably buried in another real estate deal, but wanting to share this moment anyway. "Baby appointment in 10 minutes. Wish you were here," she typed, adding a heart emoji before hitting send. When the nurse called her name, Sarah practically glowed as she followed the familiar path to the examination room. But something felt different today. The nurse, Jennifer, who had been so warm and chatty during previous visits, seemed distracted and kept glancing at her computer screen with a puzzled expression. "Mrs. Mitchell," Jennifer began hesitantly, "I need to verify some information with you. We received notification about recent changes to your insurance coverage, and I want to make sure our records are accurate." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Changes? We haven't made any changes to our insurance. David handles all that through his company, but nothing's changed." Jennifer's fingers flew across the keyboard, her confusion deepening. "According to our system, your emergency contact was recently updated to someone named Vanessa Chen. Do you know who that might be?" The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Vanessa Chen. She had never heard that name in her life, yet something about it sent ice through her veins. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. My emergency contact should be my husband, David Mitchell, or my sister Kelly." "Let me pull up your full file," Jennifer said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. She clicked through several screens, her expression growing more concerned by the minute. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm seeing some very unusual activity on your account. There are medical consultations listed here that you never attended, and payments made from credit cards that don't match the numbers we have on file for you." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly, a protective gesture that had become second nature. "I don't understand. What kind of consultations?" "Fertility treatments, prenatal vitamins ordered to a different address, even a consultation about pregnancy termination procedures." Jennifer's voice dropped to a whisper on the last part. The room began to spin around Sarah. Pregnancy termination. She had wanted this baby more than anything in the world. Who would be making those inquiries using her information, and why? "Jennifer, I need you to print out everything you're seeing on that screen. Every transaction, every appointment, every contact change. Something is very wrong here." As Jennifer's printer whirred to life, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from David. Instead of his usual loving response, she found something that made her blood run cold. "Can't make it today. Tied up with Vanessa on the Henderson property. Will call later." Vanessa, the same name from her medical records. Sarah's hands shook as she stared at the phone. David had mentioned working with various contractors and partners on his real estate deals, but he had never specifically mentioned anyone named Vanessa. In fact, Sarah realized with growing horror, David had been working late almost every night for the past 6 months, always with vague explanations about demanding clients and complex negotiations. Mrs. Mitchell, Jennifer's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you feeling all right? You look very pale." Sarah accepted the stack of papers Jennifer handed her, but the words blurred together as her mind raced. "I need to make some phone calls. Can I use your office?" Within minutes, Sarah was on the phone with their insurance company, her heart pounding as she listened to the customer service representative explain that yes, several changes had been made to her account over the past 4 months, changes that required her social security number, date of birth, and other personal information that only she or David should have known. "Ma'am, I show here that the changes were made by someone claiming to be you, calling from your verified phone number. The voice prints matched our security protocols." "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. But even as she said it, she remembered all the times David had borrowed her phone when his battery died, all the personal information he had access to as her husband. The next call was to their credit card company, where Sarah discovered 3 new accounts opened in her name within the past year, accounts she had never applied for, with statements mailed to a P.O. box she had never rented. The spending patterns made her sick, expensive dinners at romantic restaurants she had never visited, jewelry purchases from stores she couldn't afford, and monthly payments to a luxury apartment complex across town. By the time Dr. Williams entered for her examination, Sarah was barely holding herself together. The doctor immediately noticed her distress, but Sarah managed to get through the appointment in a daze, nodding mechanically as he assured her that the baby was healthy and developing perfectly. It wasn't until she was alone in her car in the medical building's parking lot that the full weight of her discovery crashed down on her. Someone had been living as her, spending as her, making medical decisions as her, and the only person with access to all her personal information was the man she trusted most in the world. Sarah fumbled for David's work phone number, the one he claimed was only for business emergencies. It went straight to voicemail, but the outgoing message made her gasp. "You've reached David and Vanessa at Mitchell Properties. We can't take your call right now, but please leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as possible." David and Vanessa, as if they were partners, as if they were equals, as if Sarah didn't exist at all. The rain started as a light drizzle, but within minutes it became a downpour that matched the storm raging inside Sarah's heart. She sat in her car, surrounded by the evidence of her stolen identity, feeling her world collapse around her. The baby kicked, as if sensing her distress, and Sarah placed both hands on her belly. "It's going to be okay, little one," she whispered through her tears. "Mommy's going to figure this out." But as she spoke the words, Sarah wasn't sure she believed them herself. How do you fight an enemy who has been living as you? How do you prove your own identity when someone else has been more convincing at being you than you have been yourself? The drive home felt endless, each familiar landmark now seeming foreign and threatening. When Sarah finally pulled into her driveway, she noticed David's car wasn't there, which was unusual for a Tuesday afternoon. He typically worked from his home office on Tuesdays, taking calls and reviewing contracts. Sarah let herself into the house that suddenly felt like a stranger's home. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt safe anymore. She went straight to David's home office, a room she rarely entered out of respect for his privacy and his often stressed explanations about confidential client information. The desk was messier than usual, with files scattered across the surface and multiple phones charging in a tangled nest of cords. Sarah recognized David's personal phone and his business phone, but there was a third device she had never seen before. A sleek rose gold iPhone with a sparkly case that definitely wasn't David's style. With trembling fingers, Sarah picked up the mysterious phone. It wasn't password protected, and the screen lit up immediately to reveal a home screen filled with apps and photos that made Sarah's knees weak. Photo after photo of David and a beautiful Asian woman with long black hair and perfect makeup. David's arm around her waist. David kissing her cheek. David looking at her with the same expression of adoration he used to reserve for Sarah. The woman was young, probably in her late 20s, with the kind of effortless beauty that made Sarah suddenly conscious of her swollen ankles and maternity clothes. But what made Sarah's blood turn to ice wasn't just seeing her husband with another woman. It was seeing how comfortable they looked together, how natural, as if they had been together for years rather than months. Sarah scrolled through the photos with morbid fascination, each image telling the story of a relationship that had been developing right under her nose. There were pictures from restaurants she and David used to frequent, vacation spots that looked familiar but which Sarah had never visited, and cozy domestic scenes that looked suspiciously like they had been taken in apartments and hotel rooms around the city. In one particularly devastating photo, Sarah saw the woman wearing a necklace that looked exactly like the anniversary gift David had given Sarah just 6 months ago. The same delicate diamond pendant that Sarah treasured as a symbol of their enduring love. But it was the text messages that truly shattered Sarah's heart. Months of intimate conversations, planning sessions, and casual exchanges that revealed the depth of their relationship. And worse, conversations about Sarah herself. She's so trusting, it's almost pathetic. Read one message from David to the woman, identified in the phone as V-Baby. She has no idea I've been using her credit to finance our new place. Good thing, came the reply. I'm getting tired of pretending to be her on all these phone calls. Can't wait until we can just be ourselves. Soon, baby. Once the baby comes and she's distracted, we can move forward with the final phase. Sarah's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. The final phase. What could that possibly mean? And how long had they been planning whatever this was? The sound of a car in the driveway made Sarah freeze. David was home, probably with her. Sarah quickly put the phone back exactly where she found it and rushed to the living room. Grabbing the insurance papers Jennifer had printed for her, she needed to confront David, but she needed to be smart about it. The front door opened, and Sarah heard David's familiar voice, but he wasn't alone. She could hear a woman's laughter, light and musical in a way that made Sarah feel ancient and heavy by comparison. David, Sarah called out, trying to keep her voice steady. Is that you? Hey, honey? David's voice carried from the entryway, but there was something different about his tone. Less warm than usual, more guarded. I brought someone home to meet you. This is Vanessa Chen, my new business partner. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as David appeared in the living room doorway, followed by the woman from the photos. In person, Vanessa was even more striking, with flawless skin and an elegant black dress that probably cost more than Sarah's entire maternity wardrobe. Sarah, Vanessa said, extending a perfectly manicured hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I've heard so much about you. David talks about his pregnant wife constantly. The way she said pregnant wife made Sarah's skin crawl, as if those were the only two things that defined her in Vanessa's mind. But what made the moment truly surreal was the way Vanessa looked around the living room with the casual familiarity of someone who had been there before. It's nice to meet you, Sarah managed, though shaking Vanessa's hand felt like touching ice. David mentioned you today when he couldn't make it to my doctor's appointment. Oh yes, Vanessa said, settling onto Sarah's couch as if she belonged there. We had such important business to discuss. In fact, Sarah, I was hoping we could all sit down and chat about some exciting developments. David looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot in a way Sarah recognized as his nervous tell. Vanessa, maybe this isn't the best time. Sarah looks tired. Nonsense, Vanessa said, her smile growing wider. I think Sarah should know exactly what's been happening. After all, it affects her directly. Sarah felt like she was watching a play where everyone knew their lines except her. What kind of developments? Vanessa reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Well, Sarah, it turns out we have quite a bit in common, more than you might think. As Vanessa began spreading papers across the coffee table, Sarah recognized some of them immediately. Credit card statements, insurance documents, bank records, all bearing her name, but showing transactions and activities she had never authorized. You see, Vanessa continued in a conversational tone, as if they were discussing the weather. "I've been living as you for quite some time now, using your credit, your insurance, your reputation, and I must say, you have excellent taste in financial institutions." Sarah's world tilted on its axis. She had suspected as much from her discoveries at the doctor's office, but hearing it confirmed so casually made her feel like she was drowning. "You've been what?" "Oh, don't look so shocked." Vanessa laughed, the sound like broken glass. "David and I needed good credit to finance our investments, and you've been so beautifully responsible with your finances over the years. It seemed wasteful not to take advantage of that." Sarah turned to David, waiting for him to defend her, to express outrage at what Vanessa was suggesting. Instead, she saw him looking at Vanessa with something that looked like admiration mixed with fear. "David," Sarah said slowly, "please tell me you didn't know about this." The silence that followed was more devastating than any confession could have been. David couldn't meet her eyes, and Sarah realized that her husband, the father of her unborn child, had been actively participating in the theft of her identity and her life. "Sarah," David finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "it's complicated." "Complicated?" Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Someone has been pretending to be me, and my husband thinks it's complicated." Vanessa stood up suddenly, her demeanor shifting from fake friendliness to something much colder. "Actually, Sarah, I haven't been pretending to be you. I've been being you better than you've been being you. Do you know how easy it was? You're so predictable, so boring, so satisfied with your little domestic life that no one questioned when I started making changes." The cruelty in Vanessa's voice was like a physical slap. Sarah looked around her living room, at the home she had lovingly decorated, at the husband she had devoted her life to, and realized that none of it belonged to her anymore. Somehow, without her even noticing, her entire existence had been systematically stolen. "David," Sarah said one more time, giving him a chance to choose her, to defend their marriage, to remember the vows they had made. For a moment, David looked like he might say something meaningful. His eyes met Sarah's, and she saw a flicker of the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. But then Vanessa placed her hand on his arm, and the moment was lost. "I think you should leave," David said quietly. "Vanessa and I have business to discuss." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her own husband was asking her to leave her own home so he could conduct business with the woman who had stolen her identity. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that Sarah couldn't even process it fully. She gathered the insurance papers from the coffee table, her movements slow and deliberate as she tried to maintain some dignity in the face of complete humiliation. "This isn't over," she said, though her voice sounded foreign to her own ears. "Actually," Vanessa called out as Sarah reached the front door, "I think you'll find that it is. You might want to check your voicemails when you get wherever you're going." Sarah didn't understand what Vanessa meant until she was sitting in her car in the driveway, too stunned to drive anywhere. Her phone had been buzzing during the confrontation, and she finally looked at it to find 17 missed calls and 12 voicemails. The first voicemail was from her bank, informing her that her accounts had been frozen due to suspicious activity. The second was from her credit card company, saying the same thing. By the fourth voicemail, Sarah realized that while she had been inside discovering her husband's betrayal, Vanessa had been systematically destroying her financial life in real time. But it was the final voicemail that truly broke Sarah's heart. It was from her doctor's office, informing her that her insurance had been canceled and that she would need to find alternative arrangements for her remaining prenatal care and the upcoming delivery. Sarah sat in her car outside her own home, watching through the window as her husband and his mistress celebrated what appeared to be the complete destruction of her life. The rain continued to pour, and Sarah finally allowed herself to cry, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She was 7 months pregnant, financially ruined, and married to a man who had actively participated in erasing her existence. But as the baby kicked inside her, as if reminding Sarah that she still had something worth fighting for, a spark of determination began to grow alongside her despair. Sarah wiped her tears and started her car. She didn't know where she was going or how she would survive what was coming. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Vanessa Chen had picked the wrong woman to destroy. As Sarah pulled out of the driveway, she didn't see Vanessa watching her from the living room window, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. And she certainly didn't see Vanessa pull out her phone and make a call that would set the next phase of her plan into motion. "It's done," Vanessa said into the phone. "She knows, and she's leaving. You can proceed with phase 2. Sarah spent that first night in her car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, unable to afford a hotel room and too humiliated to call anyone for help. Every credit card had been maxed out or frozen. Her bank accounts were inaccessible, and her phone was her only remaining connection to the world that had been systematically stolen from her. As dawn broke over the nearly empty parking lot, Sarah forced herself to think clearly. She needed help, and there was only one person she could turn to, despite the years of silence between them. Kelly, her younger sister, had always been the strong one, the fighter, the one who had joined the FBI while Sarah had chosen the safe path of marriage and domesticity. The call was harder than Sarah had expected. Kelly's voice was sharp and professional when she answered, probably not recognizing Sarah's number after so many years of minimal contact. "Kelly, it's Sarah. I need help." There was a pause that seemed to stretch forever before Kelly's voice softened slightly. "Sarah, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "David's been having an affair, and his mistress has stolen my identity. I found out yesterday, and I'm sitting in a parking lot because I can't access any of my money, and I'm 7 months pregnant, and I don't know what to do." The words tumbled out in a rush, and Sarah realized how insane they sounded. Kelly, however, had spent years dealing with complex criminal cases, and her response was immediate and practical. "Stay where you are. Text me your location. I'll be there in 2 hours." When Kelly arrived, Sarah barely recognized the polished federal agent who stepped out of the black SUV. Her little sister had grown into a formidable woman with sharp eyes and an aura of competence that made Sarah feel even more helpless by comparison. "Tell me everything," Kelly said, sliding into the diner booth across from Sarah. "Start from the beginning and don't leave out any details." As Sarah recounted the previous day's discoveries, Kelly took notes on her phone with the efficiency of someone accustomed to documenting crimes. She asked pointed questions about dates, amounts, and specific details that Sarah hadn't even thought to notice. "This isn't just an affair," Kelly said when Sarah finished. "This is organized fraud on a massive scale. Your husband and this woman have been running a long-term con using your identity as the foundation. The question is, how deep does it go?" Kelly's FBI credentials opened doors that would have remained closed to Sarah. Within hours, they had a clearer picture of the scope of the identity theft, and it was worse than Sarah had imagined. Vanessa Chen had been using Sarah's information to apply for credit cards, loans, and even employment for over 2 years. "Look at this," Kelly said, showing Sarah a credit report that made her stomach turn. "She's opened accounts at 15 different financial institutions using your information. She's taken out a car loan, a personal loan, and even applied for a mortgage on a luxury condo downtown." But the most devastating discovery came when Kelly accessed law enforcement databases that revealed Vanessa's true history. Vanessa Chen wasn't just a paralegal who had fallen for a married man. She was a professional grifter with a string of identity theft convictions in 3 different states. "Sarah," Kelly said gently. "Vanessa Chen isn't even her real name. Her actual name is Victoria Petrov, and she's been running variations of this scam for at least 8 years. She finds married women with good credit and stable lives, then systematically takes over their identities while seducing their husbands to gain access to personal information." The revelation that David hadn't just stumbled into an affair, but had been specifically targeted by a professional criminal, was almost too much for Sarah to process. It meant that everything about their relationship with Vanessa had been calculated and planned. "There's more," Kelly continued. "Victoria's previous victims, Sarah, 3 of them ended up dead under suspicious circumstances. Car accidents, apparent suicides. one drowning, all after their identities were completely compromised and their husbands had moved on with Victoria. Sarah's hands moved instinctively to her belly, protecting the life growing inside her. "You think she's planning to kill me?" "I think she's planning to completely erase you," Kelly said. "And that might not require your physical death if she can destroy your life thoroughly enough." The next few days were a blur of legal consultations, police reports, and desperate attempts to reclaim Sarah's identity. But every step forward seemed to trigger two steps backward. When Sarah tried to report the identity theft to the police, she discovered that Vanessa had already filed a report claiming that Sarah was the one committing fraud. "Mrs. Mitchell," the detective explained wearily, "we have two women claiming to be the same person, both with documentation to support their claims. This is going to require extensive investigation to sort out." Meanwhile, David refused to take Sarah's calls, and when she went to the house to collect her belongings, she found that the locks had been changed. Vanessa answered the door, wearing Sarah's favorite robe, and a smug expression that made Sarah want to scream. "Oh, Sarah," Vanessa said with fake sympathy. "David told me you might come by. He asked me to give you this." She handed Sarah an envelope containing a restraining order that had been filed that morning, claiming that Sarah had been harassing and threatening both David and Vanessa. The order prohibited Sarah from coming within 500 feet of the house, David's office, or anywhere Vanessa might be. "You can't do this," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "That's my home. Those are my things." "Actually," Vanessa said, examining her perfectly manicured nails, "David explained to the judge that you've been having some kind of breakdown related to your pregnancy. Hormonal issues, he called it, making wild accusations and behaving erratically." The judge was very understanding. The restraining order was just the beginning. Over the next week, Sarah watched helplessly as Vanessa systematically dismantled every aspect of her life. Her gym membership was canceled due to inappropriate behavior towards staff. Her volunteer position at the local animal shelter was terminated after complaints from other volunteers. Even her longtime hairdresser called to say that she could no longer provide services to Sarah due to professional concerns. Kelly tried to help, but even her FBI credentials had limitations when dealing with what appeared to be a civil dispute between estranged spouses. "The problem is that everything she's doing is just barely legal," Kelly explained. "She's using David's access to your personal information to make these changes. And since he's your husband, most institutions see him as having the right to make decisions on your behalf." Sarah was staying in Kelly's guest room, wearing the same three outfits and watching her life disappear piece by piece. The stress was affecting her pregnancy, causing constant headaches and irregular sleep patterns that worried her doctor. The same doctor who informed her that someone had called pretending to be her and had requested that all future appointments be canceled. "I don't understand," Dr. Williams said during what might be their last appointment. "The woman I spoke with claimed you were moving out of state and transferring your care to a different provider. She knew details about your medical history that only you should know." Sarah realized that Vanessa had access to her medical records through the insurance fraud she had been committing. Not only was Vanessa stealing her financial identity, but she was also interfering with Sarah's prenatal care during the most crucial weeks of her pregnancy. That night, Sarah lay awake in Kelly's guest room, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her, as if sensing her distress. She thought about the woman Vanessa really was, the professional criminal who had destroyed other women's lives with the same methodical precision she was using on Sarah. But something Kelly had said was bothering her. If Vanessa was such a professional, why was she being so obvious about the identity theft? Why had she revealed herself to Sarah so dramatically instead of continuing to work in the shadows? It didn't match the pattern of someone who had successfully evaded law enforcement for 8 years. The answer came to Sarah in a moment of horrible clarity. Vanessa wasn't trying to hide her identity theft. She was using it as a weapon to drive Sarah to desperation. The goal wasn't just to steal Sarah's financial identity, it was to destroy her so completely that she would either disappear voluntarily or do something desperate that would justify Vanessa taking over her life entirely. Sarah sat up in bed, her heart pounding as she realized the full scope of Vanessa's plan. The pregnancy wasn't just an inconvenience to Vanessa, it was a key part of the scheme. If Sarah had a breakdown, if she was declared unfit due to mental health issues, if she was arrested or committed, then David would have legal grounds to seek full custody of the baby, and Vanessa would step in as the stable, loving stepmother. Sarah was still processing this revelation when her phone rang. The caller ID showed David's number, and for a moment, Sarah's heart leaped with hope that her husband had come to his senses. Sarah. David's voice was cold and formal, nothing like the man who had held her hand during fertility treatments and whispered sweet promises about their future family. "We need to talk." "David, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. Kelly's helping me figure out what Vanessa has done, and we can fix this. We can—" "Sarah, stop." David's interruption was sharp. "I'm calling to let you know that I've filed for divorce and for full custody of the baby. Vanessa's been documenting your erratic behavior, and we have significant concerns about your mental stability." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. "My mental stability, David. She's a criminal. She's been stealing my identity for years. Kelly found her real record. She's done this before." "Sarah, you need to listen to yourself. You're making wild accusations against a woman you barely know because you can't accept that our marriage is over. Vanessa's been nothing but patient and understanding, even when you showed up at our house making threats." "Our house." He had called it their house, as if Sarah had never lived there, never made it a home, never planned to raise their child there. "This is insane," Sarah whispered. "David, this is our baby. I'm your wife. How can you be doing this?" "I'm doing what's best for everyone involved," David said, and Sarah could hear Vanessa's voice in the background, coaching him. "The papers will be served tomorrow. I suggest you get a lawyer." The line went dead, and Sarah stared at her phone in disbelief. In less than a week, she had lost her home, her husband, her financial security, and now faced losing her unborn child to the woman who had systematically destroyed her life. But as Sarah sat there in the darkness, feeling the baby move inside her, something shifted. The overwhelming despair that had been crushing her for days began to transform into something else entirely. Rage. Pure, clean rage at the woman who thought she could steal not just Sarah's identity, but her child. Kelly found Sarah in the kitchen the next morning, surrounded by printouts and legal documents, looking more focused than she had in days. "I need your help," Sarah said without preamble. "Not as my sister, but as an FBI agent. We're going to stop her." Kelly sat down across from Sarah, studying her sister's face. "What did you have in mind?" "Vanessa thinks she's so clever, but she's made one crucial mistake," Sarah said, spreading out the documents Kelly had gathered about Vanessa's criminal history. "She's gotten cocky. Look at her previous victims. She spent months or even years infiltrating their lives before making her move. But with me, she's accelerated the timeline dramatically. Because of the pregnancy," Kelly realized, "she needs to establish herself before the baby comes." "Exactly. And that means she's making mistakes, leaving evidence, getting sloppy. If we can prove that she's running the same con she's run before, that this is a pattern and not just a personal relationship, then we can get David charged as an accessory and expose her whole operation." Kelly smiled for the first time since Sarah had called her. "Now you're thinking like an investigator. What do you need from me?" "Everything you can find on her previous victims. Financial records, police reports, medical records if you can access them. And I need to know if any of them fought back." As Kelly made calls and accessed databases, Sarah began to see the pattern more clearly. Vanessa's previous victims had all been women in their late 30s or early 40s, all married to men with access to significant financial resources, all isolated from family and friends by the time Vanessa made her move. But Sarah had one advantage that the others hadn't: Kelly. And Kelly's investigation was revealing details about Vanessa's operation that even Sarah hadn't suspected. "Sarah," Kelly said, hanging up from a call with a detective in Nevada, "you need to see this. One of Vanessa's previous victims, a woman named Linda Harrison in Las Vegas. She didn't die in a car accident like the reports claimed. She survived, and she's been trying to track down Vanessa for 3 years. She's alive, Sarah felt a surge of hope. Can we contact her? Already did. She's flying here tomorrow. And Sarah, she's not the only one. Vanessa's been busier than we thought, and several of her victims are very interested in meeting the woman who might finally be able to bring her down. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah felt like she might not be fighting alone. But even as hope began to bloom in her chest, she couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa was still several steps ahead of them. And with David now actively working against her, Sarah knew that the real battle was just beginning. That evening, as Sarah tried to rest before what promised to be the most important day of her life, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Enjoying your stay at your sister's house. Such a lovely neighborhood. It would be a shame if something happened to disturb the peace. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized that Vanessa was watching her, tracking her movements, making sure she knew that nowhere was safe. But instead of the terror Vanessa was trying to instill, Sarah felt something else entirely: determination. Because if Vanessa thought she could intimidate a pregnant woman fighting for her child, she was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. The game was far from over, and Sarah was just getting started. Sarah barely slept that night, the threatening text message looping through her mind as she felt the baby move restlessly inside her. Every sound in Kelly's normally quiet neighborhood seemed amplified and sinister. When dawn finally broke, Sarah's entire body ached with tension, and she realized that the stress was affecting more than just her mental state. The cramping started during breakfast, mild at first but quickly intensifying into waves of pain that made Sarah double over at the kitchen table. Kelly took one look at her sister's pale face and grabbed her car keys. "We're going to the hospital," Kelly said, helping Sarah to her feet. "Now." The emergency room at Metropolitan General was a blur of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. Sarah was quickly wheeled into a labor and delivery room, where Dr. Williams met them with a grim expression. "Sarah, you're having premature contractions," he explained as nurses attached monitors to her belly. "The baby's heartbeat is strong, but we need to stop this labor, or you could deliver at 32 weeks. As Sarah lay on the hospital bed, an IV pumping medication to stop the contractions, she tried to focus on anything other than the possibility of losing her baby. But her temporary peace was shattered when two police officers appeared in her doorway. "Mrs. Mitchell." The older officer consulted his notepad. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of identity fraud and harassment." Sarah's world tilted as she realized what was happening. While she was fighting for her baby's life, Vanessa had managed to convince law enforcement that Sarah was the criminal. "There's been a mistake," Kelly said, stepping forward and showing her FBI credentials. "My sister is the victim here, not the perpetrator." But the officers had their orders, and despite Dr. Williams' protests about Sarah's medical condition, they were required to follow through with the arrest. Sarah found herself handcuffed to her hospital bed, under police guard while receiving treatment to prevent premature labor. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was literally chained down while the woman who had stolen her identity was free to continue destroying her life. David appeared in her doorway that afternoon, but instead of the concerned husband she desperately needed, he brought a court stenographer and a cold, professional demeanor that broke Sarah's heart all over again. "Sarah," he said, not meeting her eyes, "my attorney needs you to answer some questions about the fraudulent accounts you've been opening." "David, please," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse from hours of crying. "Look at me. Really look at me. I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. How can you believe I would do these things?" For a moment, David's mask slipped, and Sarah saw the man she had married. His eyes filled with tears, and his hand moved toward hers before stopping abruptly. "The evidence is overwhelming. Sarah." The voice recordings from the bank calls, the handwriting samples, the personal information that only you would know. "Vanessa's been helping the police understand how sophisticated your scheme was. Vanessa's been helping." Sarah couldn't hide her disbelief. "David, she is the scheme. She's the one who made those calls. She's the one who forged documents. She's done this before to other women." "That's enough," David said, standing abruptly. "The doctors say the stress of lying is what triggered your premature labor. For the baby's sake, just tell the truth." As David left with the stenographer, Sarah realized that Vanessa's manipulation was even more complete than she had imagined. Not only had she convinced David that Sarah was the criminal, but she had also made him believe that Sarah's denials were actually harmful to their unborn child. That evening, as Sarah lay in her hospital bed, still handcuffed and under guard, she watched the local news with growing horror. The story led with the headline, "Pregnant Housewife's Identity Fraud Scheme Exposed," and featured an interview with Vanessa that made Sarah's blood boil. "I just feel so sorry for Sarah," Vanessa said, looking directly into the camera with perfectly feigned concern. "The stress of maintaining such an elaborate fraud during pregnancy couldn't have been easy. I hope she gets the help she needs." The reporter pressed for more details, and Vanessa painted a picture of a desperate woman who had been stealing identities to fund a shopping addiction and maintain an affluent lifestyle. She even had tears in her eyes as she described how Sarah had threatened her when the scheme was discovered. "I'm just grateful that David and I were able to work with law enforcement to protect their unborn child from this situation," Vanessa concluded. "That baby deserves a stable, loving home." Sarah stared at her own reflection in the hospital room's window, seeing a woman she barely recognized, pale, exhausted, and literally chained to a bed. She looked exactly like the unstable criminal Vanessa was portraying her to be, but something in that reflection sparked a memory. Sarah recalled Kelly mentioning that one of Vanessa's previous victims had survived and was coming to help. If Linda Harrison could survive whatever Vanessa had done to her, then Sarah could survive this too. The next morning brought both hope and devastating news. Linda Harrison arrived at the hospital, a fierce woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and a determined set to her jaw. But she brought information that made Sarah's situation even more dire. "Vanessa's not just stealing your identity," Linda explained, speaking quietly so the guard outside couldn't overhear. "She's building a case to have you declared mentally incompetent. In my case, she managed to get me committed to a psychiatric facility for 6 months while she cleaned out my accounts and sold my house." How is that possible?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand the full scope of Vanessa's expertise. "She documents everything," Linda said. "Every conversation, every emotional reaction, every moment of stress or confusion. She builds a narrative of mental instability that becomes very convincing when presented to the right people." Linda showed Sarah copies of documents from her own case, including psychiatric evaluations that had been based entirely on Vanessa's testimony about Linda's increasingly erratic behavior. "The beautiful thing about targeting pregnant women," Linda continued bitterly, "is that pregnancy hormones provide a perfect explanation for emotional volatility. Any normal reaction to having your life stolen can be attributed to hormonal imbalance." Sarah felt the baby kick, as if responding to her rising heart rate. "So what do I do? How do I fight this?" "You do what I couldn't," Linda said firmly. "You expose her before she can get you committed, because once you're declared mentally incompetent, everything you say will be dismissed as the ravings of a disturbed person." That afternoon, Kelly arrived with news that should have been encouraging, but felt more like a death sentence. "I got you released on bail," she announced. "But Sarah, there are conditions." The conditions were devastating. Sarah was required to wear an ankle monitor, prohibited from leaving the state, and forbidden from contacting David or coming within 1,000 feet of Vanessa. Most crushingly, she was required to undergo a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation within 72 hours. "It's a trap," Linda said immediately. "The psychiatrist will be someone Vanessa has already influenced. They'll be looking for signs of mental instability, and your completely normal reaction to having your life destroyed will be used as evidence against you." But Sarah had no choice. As she was processed out of the hospital under police escort, she realized that Vanessa had maneuvered her into an impossible position. If she appeared calm and rational during the psychiatric evaluation, it would be seen as evidence that she was a calculating criminal. If she showed any emotion about her situation, it would be proof of mental instability. Kelly drove Sarah back to her house, but the neighborhood that had once felt like home now felt hostile and dangerous. Several neighbors stared as they passed, and Sarah realized that the news coverage had made her a local pariah. "I can't stay here," Sarah said as they pulled into Kelly's driveway. "Everyone thinks I'm some kind of criminal mastermind." "You don't have a choice," Kelly replied grimly. "The ankle monitor limits how far you can travel, and we need to be within range of the courthouse for your evaluation." That night, Sarah lay in Kelly's guest room, feeling more alone than she ever had in her life. The baby was quiet now. The contractions stopped by the hospital's intervention. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that even her own child was turning against her. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and Sarah's hands shook as she read it. "How was your stay in the maternity ward? Don't worry, and we'll make sure the baby has a proper home when it arrives." Sarah realized with growing horror that Vanessa wasn't just trying to steal her identity or even her husband. She was positioning herself to take custody of Sarah's baby by proving that Sarah was an unfit mother. The psychiatric evaluation was scheduled for the next morning, and Sarah knew that everything depended on those few hours. If the psychiatrist declared her mentally unstable, she would lose everything she had left to fight for. But as Sarah stared at the threatening text message, something inside her shifted. She thought about Linda Harrison, who had survived Vanessa's scheme and was still fighting. She thought about the other victims Kelly had mentioned, women who had lost everything because they hadn't known what they were up against. Sarah was facing the same battle they had lost, but she had advantages they hadn't possessed. She had Kelly's FBI resources, Linda's hard-won knowledge, and most importantly, she had advance warning about what Vanessa was really trying to accomplish. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah began to plan instead of just react. Vanessa might be a professional criminal with years of experience, but she had never faced a victim who understood her methods and was prepared to fight back strategically. The game was far from over, and Sarah was finally ready to play by her own rules. As thunder rolled outside Kelly's house and rain began to patter against the windows, Sarah placed her hands on her belly and made a promise to her unborn child. "Mommy's going to win this," she whispered. "Whatever it takes." "Sure." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah couldn't ignore the nagging fear that Vanessa was still several moves ahead, and that tomorrow's psychiatric evaluation might be the beginning of the end, rather than the start of her comeback. The baby kicked once, hard, as if agreeing that the real fight was just beginning. Sarah arrived at the psychiatric evaluation with Linda Harrison's advice echoing in her mind. "Be honest about your situation, but don't let them see how much it's affecting you emotionally. Show strength, not vulnerability." Dr. Patricia Morgan was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who seemed genuinely interested in understanding Sarah's perspective. For the first hour, Sarah began to hope that maybe finally someone would listen to her side of the story. "Mrs. Mitchell," Dr. Morgan said, reviewing her notes, "I understand you've been under tremendous stress recently. Can you tell me about your relationship with your husband?" Sarah chose her words carefully, describing the loving marriage she thought she had, while acknowledging the signs she now realized she had missed. She explained about the identity theft, about Vanessa's criminal history, about the systematic destruction of her life. Dr. Morgan listened without interruption, taking detailed notes. "These are serious allegations," she said when Sarah finished. "Have you considered that your pregnancy might be affecting your perception of these events?" The question was a trap, and Sarah recognized it immediately. If she said yes, it would be used as evidence that she was unstable. If she said no, it would suggest she lacked insight into her own mental state. "I think any woman would be affected by discovering her husband's affair and her identity being stolen," Sarah said carefully. "But I believe my perceptions are accurate." Dr. Morgan nodded and made another note. "I'd like to discuss some specific incidents that have been reported to me. Can you tell me about the day you allegedly threatened Mrs. Chen at your former residence?" Sarah's heart sank as she realized that Vanessa had already gotten to Dr. Morgan. Every question was based on Vanessa's version of events, and Sarah found herself defending actions she had never taken and emotions she had never expressed. By the end of the 3-hour evaluation, Sarah felt like she had been put through an emotional blender. Dr. Morgan's questions had been designed to elicit responses that could be interpreted as evidence of mental instability, and Sarah wasn't sure how well she had navigated the minefield. "I'll have my report completed within 48 hours," Dr. Morgan said as they concluded. "In the meantime, I'm recommending that you continue with prenatal care and avoid any stressful situations." Sarah wanted to laugh at the absurdity of avoiding stress while facing criminal charges and fighting for custody of her unborn child. But she managed to simply nod and thank Dr. Morgan for her time. Kelly was waiting in the parking lot, and one look at Sarah's face told her everything she needed to know. "It was a setup," Sarah said as they drove away. "She had already made up her mind before I walked in there." That evening, Linda Harrison joined them for dinner, bringing more information about Vanessa's methods and more bad news about their legal situation. "I've been in contact with 2 other survivors," Linda announced. "Jennifer Walsh from Phoenix and Michelle Santos from Denver. They're both willing to testify about Vanessa's pattern of behavior." "That's great," Kelly said. "Multiple victims establishing a pattern will definitely help Sarah's case." But Linda's expression was grim. "There's a problem. Vanessa's legal team has filed motions to exclude their testimony, claiming it's irrelevant to Sarah's case since each situation was allegedly different." Sarah felt the baby move restlessly, as if responding to her rising stress levels. "So even though she's done this before, we can't use that to prove she's doing it to me. Not unless we can prove direct connections between the cases," Linda explained. "Similar methods, identical documentation, shared resources. We need evidence that this is an organized operation, not just a series of coincidental relationships." The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's phone ringing. Dr. Williams' name appeared on the screen, and Sarah answered immediately. "Worried about another medical emergency?" "Sarah," Dr. Williams said, his voice strained, "I need you to come to the hospital immediately. There's been a complication." Sarah's world stopped. "Is it the baby? Just come in through the emergency entrance. Ask for me specifically." The drive to the hospital was a blur of worst-case scenarios and desperate prayers. Sarah clutched Kelly's hand as they rushed through the emergency room doors, following signs to the labor and delivery ward. Dr. Williams met them in the hallway, and his expression made Sarah's knees weak. "Sarah, your insurance has been canceled again, and the hospital administration is requiring payment in advance for any further prenatal care. But that's not why I called you." He led them to a private consultation room and closed the door carefully. "I received a very strange call this afternoon," Dr. Williams continued. "A woman claiming to be you called to discuss scheduling a cesarean section for next week. She said you had decided that an early delivery would be best for both you and the baby." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "I never made that call." "I know," Dr. Williams said. "The woman knew details about your pregnancy that she shouldn't have known. But there were things she got wrong that you would never have gotten wrong. She referred to your husband as Derek instead of David, and she thought you were having a boy when we've confirmed you're having a girl." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Vanessa was trying to force an early delivery, probably to claim that Sarah was an unfit mother who couldn't even carry her pregnancy to term safely. "Dr. Williams," Kelly interrupted, "would an early delivery at 34 weeks create legal grounds for questioning Sarah's fitness as a mother?" Dr. Williams looked uncomfortable. "If it appeared that the early delivery was caused by maternal stress, drug use, or intentional actions, it could certainly be used to support claims of unfitness." Sarah realized that Vanessa's plan was even more diabolical than she had imagined. By impersonating Sarah and requesting early delivery, Vanessa could create medical documentation that would support her claims that Sarah was making dangerous decisions about her pregnancy. "What can we do?" Sarah asked. "I've made notes in your file about the impersonation attempt," Dr. Williams said, "and I'm requiring in-person verification for any future decisions about your care. But Sarah, I have to warn you that the stress you're under is genuinely affecting your pregnancy. Your blood pressure is elevated, and the baby's movement patterns have changed. As if responding to the doctor's words, the baby kicked hard enough to make Sarah gasp. She placed her hands on her belly, trying to communicate reassurance to the life growing inside her. "We're going to figure this out, little one," she whispered. "Mommy won't let anything happen to you." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah felt the crushing weight of her situation. She was fighting a battle on multiple fronts: legal, financial, medical, and emotional, while trying to protect an unborn child who was becoming increasingly vulnerable to the stress of their circumstances. Kelly drove them home in tense silence, both sisters lost in their own thoughts about the escalating nature of Vanessa's attacks. As they pulled into the driveway, Sarah noticed a car she didn't recognize parked across the street. "Kelly," she said quietly, "that car has been behind us since we left the hospital." Kelly glanced in her rearview mirror, her FBI training immediately kicking in. "Stay in the car," she instructed, reaching for her service weapon. "Let me check this out." But as Kelly approached the mysterious vehicle, the driver started the engine and pulled away quickly, leaving Kelly with only a partial license plate number. "Vanessa's having us watched," Sarah realized as they finally made it safely inside Kelly's house. "She wants to know our every move." That night, Sarah lay awake listening to every sound in the house, hyper-aware that their enemies were literally watching their movements. The ankle monitor felt heavier than usual, a constant reminder that she was essentially under house arrest while the real criminal operated freely. Around midnight, Sarah's phone buzzed with another anonymous text. "Beautiful evening for a drive. Wasn't it such lovely neighborhoods around here? Perfect for raising children." The message was accompanied by a photo that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was a picture of Kelly's house, taken from across the street, with Sarah clearly visible in the living room window. Sarah woke Kelly immediately, showing her the threatening message. Kelly's response was swift and professional. "We're calling this in to the FBI Threat Assessment Unit," Kelly said, already reaching for her phone. "And we're getting a security system installed tomorrow." Twantanen. But as Kelly made her calls and Sarah tried to calm the baby who was responding to her racing heartbeat, both sisters knew that they were fighting an enemy who seemed to anticipate their every move. The next morning brought news that crushed what little hope Sarah had remaining. Dr. Morgan's psychiatric evaluation had been completed, and the results were devastating. "Dr. Morgan is recommending a more comprehensive psychological assessment," Kelly reported after speaking with Sarah's attorney. "She's citing concerns about your emotional stability and your ability to care for a newborn in your current mental state." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. "What does that mean?" "It means we have 72 hours to present evidence that contradicts her assessment, or the court will order you to undergo inpatient psychiatric evaluation," Kelly explained grimly. "And if that happens while you're pregnant—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah understood that if she was declared mentally incompetent while pregnant, custody of her baby could be transferred to David before the child was even born. As Sarah sat in Kelly's kitchen, surrounded by legal documents and evidence that seemed increasingly meaningless against Vanessa's systematic manipulation of the system, she felt the baby move in what seemed like a desperate attempt to get her attention. "I know, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, rubbing her belly. "Mommy's scared too." But fear wasn't going to save her baby or reclaim her life. Sarah looked at the threatening photos, the psychiatric evaluation, the mountain of evidence that proved Vanessa's guilt, but somehow couldn't protect Sarah from her attacks. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah realized that playing by the rules might not be enough. Vanessa was a professional criminal who had spent years perfecting her methods, and she had the advantage of operating within a system that was designed to protect exactly the kind of respectable facade she presented. If Sarah was going to win this battle, she might have to stop trying to prove her innocence and start exposing Vanessa's guilt through methods that weren't entirely legal or entirely safe. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, and Sarah made a decision that would change everything. It was time to stop being the victim and start being the hunter. Sarah's transformation began that night. fueled by maternal instinct and righteous anger. While Kelly worked through official FBI channels, Sarah decided it was time to investigate Vanessa using methods that wouldn't be bound by legal constraints or bureaucratic procedures. Linda Harrison proved to be the perfect mentor for Sarah's new approach. Over coffee the next morning, Linda shared the survival skills she had learned during her own battle with Vanessa. "The mistake I made was trusting the system to protect me," Linda explained. "By the time I realized that Vanessa had corrupted every official channel I tried to use, it was too late. She had already convinced everyone that I was the problem." Linda opened her laptop and showed Sarah a detailed file she had been compiling on Vanessa for 3 years. "But I've been learning everything I can about her methods, her associates, and her patterns. She's not as careful as she thinks she is." The file contained information that made Sarah's heart race with hope. Bank records showing suspicious patterns of money movement, surveillance photos of Vanessa meeting with known criminals, and most importantly, evidence that Vanessa was currently running similar scams on at least 2 other women in different cities. "She's gotten greedy," Linda explained. "Instead of focusing on one victim at a time like she used to, she's now running multiple operations simultaneously. That means she's making mistakes and leaving more evidence." Sarah studied the surveillance photos with fascination. There was Vanessa meeting with a man Linda identified as Marcus Webb, a professional document forger who had been connected to several major identity theft rings. In another photo, Vanessa was handing an envelope to a woman Linda believed was a corrupt social worker who falsified psychological evaluations. "This is it," Sarah said, her excitement building. "This proves that what she's doing to me is part of an organized criminal operation." But Linda's expression was cautious. Proving it and using it in court are two different things. Most of this evidence was obtained through private investigation methods that wouldn't be admissible in a legal proceeding. Sarah felt her hope deflating until Linda smiled grimly and continued. "However, this evidence can help us predict her next moves and set traps for her. If we know what she's planning, we can be ready for her." Kelly arrived home that evening to find Sarah and Linda hunched over laptops and legal documents, looking more energized than Sarah had appeared in weeks. "What are you two plotting?" Kelly asked, though her FBI training had already picked up on the covert nature of their activities. Sarah explained their discoveries about Vanessa's criminal network and their plan to use that intelligence to anticipate her next attacks. Kelly listened with growing concern. "Sarah, I understand you're frustrated with the legal process, but you can't take the law into your own hands. It could destroy your case and put you in real danger." "Kelly, the legal process isn't protecting me," Sarah replied firmly. "Vanessa has corrupted every official channel. The police think I'm the criminal, the psychiatrist thinks I'm unstable, and even my own husband thinks I'm lying. If I don't fight back on my own terms, I'm going to lose everything." The argument that followed was intense but brief. Kelly ultimately agreed to provide unofficial support for Sarah's investigation, with the understanding that anything they discovered would need to be channeled through proper legal procedures. "But I want to be clear," Kelly said. "If this gets dangerous, if Vanessa realizes what you're doing, you could end up like her previous victims who didn't survive." That night, Sarah lay in bed feeling her baby move restlessly, as if the child could sense the dangerous path her mother was choosing. But for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt like she had some control over her destiny. The next morning brought the first test of their new strategy. Linda's intelligence network had indicated that Vanessa would be meeting with Marcus Webb at a downtown coffee shop to discuss forging new documents. Sarah and Linda positioned themselves across the street, using a rented car and professional surveillance equipment that Linda had acquired during her own investigation. Watching Vanessa through high-powered binoculars, Sarah was struck by how different the woman looked when she thought she wasn't being observed. Gone was the sweet, vulnerable act she performed for David and the authorities. In its place was a cold, calculating professional who conducted her criminal business with businesslike efficiency. "She's handing him something," Linda whispered, adjusting her camera to capture the exchange. "Probably samples of your handwriting and signature for him to copy." Sarah watched as Vanessa and Marcus discussed what appeared to be a complex operation involving multiple documents. When Vanessa passed Marcus a thick envelope, Linda managed to photograph the exchange from multiple angles. "This is perfect," Linda said as they drove away. "We now have evidence of her working with a known criminal, and the timing suggests it's related to your case." But their success was short-lived. That afternoon, Sarah received a call from Dr. Williams that sent her into a panic. "Sarah, someone called pretending to be your sister and tried to access your medical records," Dr. Williams reported. They claimed Kelly needed the information for legal proceedings, but something about the call didn't feel right. Sarah immediately called Kelly, who confirmed that she had made no such call. The realization that Vanessa was now impersonating Kelly as well sent chills down Sarah's spine. "She's escalating," Linda observed when Sarah reported the incident. "She must be feeling pressure from somewhere." The pressure became apparent that evening when Kelly returned home with disturbing news from her FBI contacts. "Vanessa's legal team has filed a motion for emergency custody," Kelly announced. "They're claiming that your recent behavior suggests you're becoming increasingly unstable and pose a danger to your unborn child." Sarah's hands moved protectively to her belly. "What recent behavior?" Kelly consulted her notes grimly. "Allegedly, you've been following Vanessa around town, taking photographs of her and making threatening phone calls. They have documentation of all of it." Sarah felt the room spinning around her as she realized what had happened. While she and Linda had been conducting surveillance on Vanessa, Vanessa had been documenting their activities and spinning them to look like harassment and stalking. "She played us," Sarah whispered. "She wanted us to follow her so she could use it against me." Linda's face was pale with understanding. "She's done this before. In my case, she manipulated me into confronting her publicly, then used my emotional outburst as evidence that I was mentally unstable." The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for the next morning, giving them less than 12 hours to mount a defense. Sarah's attorney was pessimistic about their chances. "The psychiatric evaluation, combined with the harassment allegations and your criminal charges, creates a very concerning pattern," he explained during an emergency conference call. "Unless we can present compelling evidence of Vanessa's criminal activity, the judge is likely to err on the side of protecting the unborn child." That night, Sarah found herself faced with an impossible choice. She could continue fighting through legal channels and likely lose custody of her baby, or she could use the evidence Linda had gathered through illegal surveillance, which would destroy her credibility but might expose Vanessa's crimes. As Sarah lay awake wrestling with this decision, her phone rang with a call from David. For a moment, her heart leaped with hope that her husband had finally come to his senses. "Sarah!" David's voice was cold and formal, but there was something underneath that sounded almost like regret. "I wanted to call before tomorrow's hearing." "David, please," Sarah began, but he cut her off. "I want you to know that I take no pleasure in this, but Vanessa's shown me evidence of things you've been doing, things that scare me. Following her around, taking pictures, making threats. This isn't the woman I married." "Because I'm not doing those things," Sarah said desperately. "David, she's manipulating you. She's a professional criminal who's done this to other women. Kelly has proof." There was a long pause, and Sarah heard muffled voices in the background before David spoke again. "Sarah, even if that were true, your behavior recently has been erratic enough that I can't risk our child's safety. I'm sorry." The line went dead, and Sarah stared at her phone in disbelief, even faced with the possibility that he was being manipulated by a criminal. David was choosing to believe Vanessa over his own wife, but as Sarah processed the conversation, something nagged at her. David's tone had been wrong, almost like he was reading from a script, and those background voices had Vanessa been coaching him through the call. Sarah grabbed her laptop and pulled up the audio recording app Kelly had installed on her phone. Playing back the conversation, she could clearly hear Vanessa's voice whispering instructions to David between his responses. For the first time in this entire nightmare, Sarah had proof that David was being actively manipulated rather than willingly participating in Vanessa's scheme. It wasn't much, but it was something. As dawn broke over what could be Sarah's last day of freedom, She made a decision that would either save her family or destroy any chance she had left. She was going to gamble everything on exposing Vanessa's manipulation, even if it meant revealing the illegal methods she had used to gather evidence. The baby kicked hard, as if approving of her mother's fighting spirit, and Sarah whispered one more promise into the darkness. "Mommy's going to bring Daddy home," she said. "Whatever it takes." The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m., but Sarah's day began at 5 when her phone exploded with notifications that made her stomach turn. Overnight, someone had created social media accounts in her name and posted increasingly erratic messages that painted her as an unstable woman spiraling into paranoid delusions. "Look at this," Kelly said, showing Sarah a Facebook post allegedly from her account. "Everyone is lying to me about Vanessa. Even my own sister is working with them now. I know they're all plotting against me and my baby." The posts had been shared hundreds of times, with comments from people Sarah had never met calling her crazy and dangerous. Worse, several posts included photos that appeared to show Sarah stalking Vanessa, though Sarah knew the images had been manipulated to make innocent activities look sinister. "She's destroying my reputation in real time," Sarah realized, scrolling through Twitter posts that made her sound increasingly paranoid and unstable. "By the time we get to court, everyone will have seen this." Linda arrived with coffee and grim news. "It gets worse." Local news stations picked up the social media posts, and they're running a story about the troubled pregnant woman whose mental health concerns have led to emergency custody proceedings. Sarah watched in horror as the morning news featured a segment about her case, complete with expert commentary about the dangers of untreated mental illness during pregnancy. The reporter described Sarah as a woman whose pregnancy-related mental health issues have escalated to the point where her own husband fears for their unborn child's safety. "They're not even pretending to be objective," Sarah said, watching Vanessa's interview from the previous week being replayed with new context that made Sarah look even more unstable by comparison. Kelly was working frantically on her laptop, trying to trace the origin of the fake social media accounts. These were created using VPN services and fake email addresses, but the posting patterns suggest professional social media manipulation. This isn't just personal revenge, this is a coordinated campaign. As they prepared to leave for court, Sarah caught sight of herself in Kelly's hallway mirror and was shocked by what she saw. The stress of the past weeks had taken a visible toll. Her face was pale and drawn. Her hair was lifeless, and the dark circles under her eyes made her look exactly like the unstable woman Vanessa was portraying her to be. This is what she wanted, Sarah realized. She's not just stealing my identity, she's destroying it so completely that even I don't recognize myself anymore. The courthouse was surrounded by news vans and protesters, some supporting Sarah and others calling for her to be locked up for the safety of her child. Sarah had to walk through a gauntlet of cameras and shouting reporters to reach the building's entrance. Inside the courtroom, Sarah was devastated to see how many people had come to testify against her. David sat with Vanessa, both looking appropriately concerned and professional. Dr. Morgan, the psychiatrist, had a thick file of documentation. Even Mrs. Patterson, Sarah's elderly neighbor, was there with what appeared to be a statement. Sarah's attorney, Robert Chen, did his best to present their defense, but the evidence against Sarah was overwhelming and convincing. The fake social media posts, the surveillance photos, the psychiatric evaluation, and the criminal charges created a narrative of progressive mental deterioration that was difficult to challenge. When David took the stand, Sarah held her breath, hoping that her husband would finally recognize the manipulation he was experiencing. Instead, he delivered testimony that broke her heart completely. "Your Honor," David said, his voice heavy with apparent sadness, "I've watched my wife become someone I don't recognize. The accusations she's making against Vanessa are becoming more elaborate and paranoid each day. She's convinced that there's some vast conspiracy against her, and she started seeing enemies everywhere." "Can you give the court specific examples?" the prosecutor asked. David pulled out his phone and began reading text messages that Sarah had allegedly sent him. Yesterday, she texted me that even her sister was working with Vanessa against her. She said Kelly was feeding information to the enemy and that she couldn't trust anyone. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. Someone had been texting David from a phone that appeared to be hers, sending messages that made her sound increasingly paranoid and unstable. "I never sent those messages," Sarah whispered to her attorney, but Robert looked skeptical. When it was time for Sarah to testify on her own behalf, she felt like she was drowning in quicksand. Every explanation she offered sounded like the desperate lies of someone caught in an elaborate deception. "Mrs. Mitchell," the prosecutor said, "do you maintain that all of these people, your husband, Dr. Morgan, the police investigators, the bank officials are all mistaken about your behavior?" "I maintain that they've been given false information by someone who is very skilled at manipulation," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "And you believe this person has somehow convinced all of these professionals to participate in a conspiracy against you?" When Sarah said yes, she could see the skepticism in the judge's eyes. From an outside perspective, it did sound like an elaborate paranoid delusion. The judge's decision was swift and devastating. Temporary custody of Sarah's unborn child would be transferred to David, with supervised visitation rights for Sarah, contingent on her compliance with a comprehensive mental health treatment program. "Mrs. Mitchell," the judge said, not unkindly, "I believe you love your child and want what's best for her, but the evidence suggests that you're currently unable to provide the stable environment she needs. This order is designed to protect both of you while getting you the help you clearly need." As Sarah walked out of the courthouse, having lost her unborn child before she had even been born, the media circus outside felt surreal and distant. Reporters shouted questions about her mental health and her plans for treatment, but Sarah felt like she was watching everything happen to someone else. Kelly drove them home in silence while Sarah stared out the window at a world that no longer made sense. She had fought as hard as she could within the system, and the system had decided she was the problem. That evening, as Sarah sat in Kelly's guest room, surrounded by the wreckage of her life, she received a text message that pushed her beyond her breaking point. "Congratulations on your new living arrangement. Don't worry, I'll take excellent care of your husband and your baby. You should focus on getting the help you so clearly need." The message was accompanied by a photo of Vanessa in Sarah's former home, wearing Sarah's clothes and sitting in Sarah's favorite chair, with David visible in the background, looking relaxed and happy. Sarah stared at the image until her vision blurred with tears. This wasn't just identity theft anymore. This was complete life replacement. Vanessa hadn't just stolen Sarah's financial identity, she had stolen her entire existence and convinced everyone that Sarah was the intruder in her own life. As Sarah finally allowed herself to break down completely, sobbing until her whole body shook, she felt the baby moving restlessly inside her, as if responding to her mother's despair. "I'm sorry, little one," Sarah whispered through her tears. "Mommy tried so hard to protect you." But even in the depths of her despair, Sarah felt a spark of something that refused to be extinguished. Anger. Pure, clean anger at the woman who thought she could steal a mother's child and get away with it. Sarah might have lost the legal battle, but the war was far from over. And if the system wouldn't protect her, then she would have to protect herself and her baby using methods that the system couldn't touch. The baby kicked hard, as if agreeing with her mother's resolution, and Sarah wiped her tears with new determination. Vanessa had won this round, but she had made one crucial mistake. She had pushed Sarah beyond caring about rules, procedures, or consequences. And a mother fighting for her child was the most dangerous opponent Vanessa had ever faced. Sarah's transformation from victim to investigator began with a package that arrived at Kelly's house 3 days after the custody hearing. The return address was from Linda Harrison, but when Sarah opened it, she found materials she had never seen before. "Linda's been busier than we knew," Kelly observed, spreading the contents across her dining room table. "This looks like a professional intelligence operation." The package contained detailed dossiers on Vanessa's previous victims, financial records that had been obtained through methods Sarah preferred not to think about too closely, and most importantly, documentation that revealed the true scope of Vanessa's criminal enterprise. "Look at this," Sarah said, studying a flowchart that connected Vanessa to at least 12 different identity theft cases across 7 states. "She's not working alone. This is a network." The documentation revealed that Vanessa was part of a sophisticated criminal organization that specialized in targeting middle-aged women during vulnerable periods of their lives: pregnancy, divorce, death of a spouse, job loss, any major life transition that might make a woman emotionally susceptible and financially distracted. But what made Sarah's blood run cold was the section of the file dedicated to what Linda had labeled disposal methods. The previous victims who had died hadn't been random accidents. They had been eliminated when they became too much of a threat to the organization's operations. "Sarah," Kelly said quietly, "we need to take this to the FBI immediately. This isn't just identity theft anymore. This is potentially multiple homicides." But Sarah was studying a different section of the file, one that made her heart race with something between terror and hope. "Kelly, look at this. Vanessa's not done with me yet." The documents included emails between Vanessa and her associates discussing the Mitchell situation and plans for what they called final disposal. The timeline they were working with was clearly connected to Sarah's pregnancy. "They're waiting for me to give birth," Sarah realized. "Once the baby is born and custody is established, I become a liability that needs to be eliminated." Kelly read over Sarah's shoulder, her FBI training making her immediately grasp the implications. "We have maybe 6 weeks before your due date. 6 weeks to expose this entire operation and save your life." The next few days were a blur of clandestine meetings and careful planning. Linda Harrison proved to have connections that surprised even Kelly, former law enforcement officers who had become private investigators, journalists who specialized in exposing corruption, and most importantly, other survivors of Vanessa's network who were ready to fight back. "The problem we've always faced," Linda explained during a meeting in an abandoned warehouse that felt like something out of a spy movie, "is that these people are too good at corrupting the system from the inside. They have contacts in law enforcement, in the courts, in social services. Fighting them through official channels is like fighting them on their home turf." Sarah looked around the room at the other women who had gathered survivors who had lost everything, but had somehow found the strength to keep fighting. Jennifer Walsh, whose husband had been convinced she was having a mental breakdown while Vanessa stole her family's restaurant business. Michelle Santos, who had lost custody of her 2 children when Vanessa's psychological manipulation convinced the courts that Michelle was an unfit mother. "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. "We expose them publicly," said Jennifer. "Not through the courts, but through the media. We make their crimes so visible that they can't hide behind corrupt officials anymore." Michelle pulled out a laptop and showed Sarah a website they had been building. "We've been documenting everything, every victim, every crime, every corrupt official who helped them. But we needed a current case to make it newsworthy." "My case," Sarah realized. "Your case is perfect," Linda confirmed. "You're sympathetic. The crimes are happening in real time, and you have an FBI agent sister who can verify the evidence. If we can get this story to go viral, it will expose the entire network." But as Sarah studied the website and the evidence they had compiled, she realized there was still a missing piece. "We need proof that Vanessa is still actively committing crimes. All of this is historical. It doesn't prove she's currently doing anything illegal." Kelly had been quiet during the discussion, but now she spoke up with the tone Sarah recognized from her law enforcement days. "Actually, we might be able to get that proof, but it would require Sarah to do something very dangerous." "What kind of dangerous?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. "We need you to make contact with Vanessa. Not confrontational contact, but conciliatory. Make her think you've given up, that you're accepting the situation. If she believes you're no longer a threat, she might let her guard down enough to reveal her plans." The idea of voluntarily interacting with the woman who had destroyed her life made Sarah's skin crawl, but she could see the logic. "You want me to wear a wire?" "More than that," Kelly said. "We want you to convince her that you're ready to disappear voluntarily. Make her think you're going to take some kind of deal that involves you giving up your parental rights and leaving town quietly. Linda was nodding approvingly. If she thinks you're cooperating, she'll want to lock in the arrangement quickly. She might reveal details about how the custody transfer will work, where the money goes, maybe even who else is involved. Sarah placed her hands on her belly, feeling the baby move in response to her elevated heart rate. And if she realizes what I'm doing? The silence that followed answered her question more clearly than words could have. That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about the choice in front of her. She could continue trying to fight through the system that had already failed her, or she could take an enormous risk that might expose Vanessa's crimes, but could also get her killed. The decision was made for her when her phone rang at 3 a.m. with a call from David's number. Sarah. David's voice was slurred with sleep and something else, maybe alcohol. I need to tell you something. David, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Nothing's okay, David said, and Sarah could hear tears in his voice. Sarah, I think I made a mistake. A huge mistake. Sarah's heart leaped with hope. What do you mean? Vanessa? She's not who I thought she was. I found things. Sarah, documents in her purse, conversations on her phone. I think she's been lying to me about everything. David, where are you? I'm at a hotel. I couldn't stay in that house with her anymore. Sarah, I think she's dangerous. I think she's planning to hurt you. Before Sarah could respond, she heard a commotion in the background, the sound of a door opening. Voices, and then David's panicked shout, Sarah, don't trust! The line went dead. Sarah immediately tried calling back, but David's phone went straight to voicemail. She called Kelly, who was downstairs on the phone with FBI emergency services, within minutes. We need to find him, Sarah said, pacing Kelly's kitchen while trying not to panic. If Vanessa realizes that David is having second thoughts about her, Kelly hung up from her call with a grim expression. The FBI is treating this as a potential kidnapping. But Sarah, you need to understand something. If David has become a liability to Vanessa's organization, they won't hesitate to eliminate him, just like they've eliminated other witnesses. The realization that her husband might be in mortal danger because he had finally started to see through Vanessa's manipulation pushed Sarah beyond fear into a realm of cold, calculated determination. Set up the meeting with Vanessa, Sarah told Kelly. Tonight. Sarah, that's too dangerous now. If they have David, then playing it safe isn't going to save him. Sarah interrupted. They're escalating anyway. We need to force their hand before they have time to clean up loose ends. As dawn broke over what could be the most dangerous day of Sarah's life, she prepared to walk into the lion's den wearing a wire and carrying the hopes of every woman Vanessa's network had victimized. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing the danger ahead, and Sarah whispered the same promise she had been making for weeks. Mommy's going to save Daddy and bring him home, whatever it takes. But this time, Sarah knew that whatever it takes might include sacrificing her own life to expose the truth. The meeting with Vanessa was set for noon at a downtown restaurant that Kelly had chosen specifically for its excellent sight lines and multiple exit points. Sarah wore the wire with the knowledge that she was walking into a trap, but also with the hope that she might finally get Vanessa to reveal enough truth to bring down the entire network. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table where the FBI surveillance team could clearly observe her. Her hands shook slightly as she ordered coffee, but she forced herself to project the image of a broken woman ready to surrender. Vanessa arrived exactly on time, looking stunning in a designer dress that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly grocery budget. But as she approached the table, Sarah noticed something different about her nemesis. The mask of sweet vulnerability was completely gone, replaced by the cold confidence of a predator who believed she had already won. Sarah, Vanessa said, settling into her chair with the casual grace of someone attending a pleasant social lunch. You look terrible. Pregnancy stress doesn't agree with you. Thank you for meeting with me, Sarah replied, keeping her voice meek and defeated. I wanted to discuss arrangements. Vanessa's smile was sharp as a blade. I was hoping you'd come to your senses. It's so much easier when people accept reality instead of fighting the inevitable. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah played the role of her life. She spoke about accepting that her marriage was over, acknowledging that she might not be fit to raise her child, and expressing a desire to make this as easy as possible for everyone involved. Vanessa listened with growing satisfaction, occasionally offering false sympathy while clearly relishing Sarah's apparent defeat. I'm glad you're being reasonable, Vanessa said. David was so worried about how you would handle the transition, but I assured him that you would eventually see what's best for everyone. Speaking of David, Sarah said carefully, I haven't been able to reach him since yesterday. I wanted to discuss the custody arrangements with him directly. For just a moment, Vanessa's mask slipped, and Sarah saw something cold and dangerous flash in her eyes. David is taking some time to process everything, Vanessa said smoothly. The stress of recent events has been difficult for him, but don't worry, I'm taking very good care of him. The way she said taking care of him sent ice through Sarah's veins, but she forced herself to nod understandingly. Of course, this has been hard on everyone. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice dropping to a more conspiratorial tone. Sarah, I want you to know that I don't take any pleasure in how this has unfolded. You seem like a nice person who just got in over her head. I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore, Sarah said, which was actually true. Identity is such a fluid thing, Vanessa mused, and Sarah realized she was about to hear something important. Most people think they are who they say they are, but really identity is just a collection of documents and digital footprints. Change the documents, alter the digital presence, and you can become anyone you want to be. Is that what you did, became someone else? Vanessa laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Honey, I've been so many people I sometimes forget who I was originally. Victoria Petrov was just one name among many, but Vanessa Chen is perfect. She's everything Sarah Mitchell should have been, but was too boring to become. The admission was exactly what the FBI needed to hear, but Sarah knew she had to push for more details. How did you learn to do all this? It seems so complicated. Practice, Vanessa said with pride. And excellent teachers. You'd be amazed how many people are willing to help you become someone else if you pay them enough. Vanessa pulled out her phone and showed Sarah photos that made her stomach turn. Images of Sarah's former home with all of Sarah's belongings replaced by Vanessa's things. Pictures of Vanessa wearing Sarah's wedding dress, which had been altered to fit her smaller frame. I've become you better than you ever were, Vanessa said with satisfaction. David is so much happier with the improved version. What happens to me now? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Vanessa's expression grew thoughtful, almost philosophical. Well, that depends on how cooperative you continue to be. If you sign the custody papers voluntarily and disappear quietly, you might find yourself starting a new life somewhere far away with a generous settlement to help you get established. And if I don't cooperate, the temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah, you've seen how effectively we can destroy someone's life using legal methods. But there are other approaches when legal methods prove insufficient. Vanessa showed Sarah another photo on her phone, an image of Sarah leaving Kelly's house that morning. The implication was clear: they had been watching her every move. I'm not threatening you, Vanessa continued sweetly. I'm simply pointing out that accidents happen, especially to people who are already perceived as mentally unstable. Pregnancy complications, postpartum depression leading to tragic decisions. The medical community would find such outcomes terribly sad, but completely understandable. Sarah felt the baby kick hard, as if responding to the threat against both their lives. I understand, Sarah said quietly. I'll sign whatever papers you need. Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. I was hoping you'd see reason. These documents will finalize the custody transfer and include a very generous settlement offer. All you need to do is sign, and this whole nightmare can be over. As Sarah accepted the envelope, she noticed that Vanessa's purse remained open, revealing multiple cell phones and what appeared to be several different identification documents. Vanessa, Sarah said carefully, Can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Did you ever feel guilty about any of this, about destroying families? Vanessa's expression turned genuinely puzzled, as if the question made no sense to her. Guilty, Sarah. I don't destroy families, I improve them. David is happier with me than he ever was with you. Your baby will have a better mother in me than she would have had in you. I take broken, mediocre lives and make them extraordinary. The complete absence of empathy in Vanessa's voice was more chilling than any threat she had made. You really believe that? Sarah realized. I know that, Vanessa corrected. Look at your life. Sarah, really look at it. You were a middle-aged housewife going through the motions of a boring marriage with a man who had clearly outgrown you. I gave David excitement, passion, adventure. I gave your baby a chance to be raised by someone with ambition and intelligence instead of someone whose greatest accomplishment was organizing school fundraisers. The cruelty was breathtaking, but Sarah forced herself to nod as if accepting the criticism. I need some time to review these papers, Sarah said. Of course, take the weekend. But Sarah, I need your decision by Monday. After that, the offer expires, and we move to less pleasant alternatives. As Vanessa gathered her things to leave, she paused and looked at Sarah with something that might have been genuine concern. For what it's worth, I hope you make the smart choice. You seem like someone who could build a nice life for herself somewhere else. Don't throw that opportunity away for the sake of pride. After Vanessa left, Sarah sat alone at the table for several minutes, processing what she had just experienced. She had expected Vanessa to be manipulative and cruel, but she hadn't been prepared for the complete absence of human empathy she had witnessed. Kelly appeared at her table within minutes, having monitored the entire conversation through the wire. We got enough, Kelly said quietly. The admissions about identity theft, the threats, the evidence of an ongoing criminal enterprise, it's all recorded. What about David? Sarah asked. She was definitely threatening him without saying it directly. We're working on that. The FBI has traced the hotel call to a location downtown, and they're moving on it now. As they left the restaurant, Sarah felt a mixture of hope and terror. They had the evidence they needed to expose Vanessa's crimes, but they had also confirmed that Sarah and David were both in mortal danger. The next 24 hours would determine whether justice would prevail or whether Vanessa's network would successfully eliminate the witnesses who could bring them down. That evening, as Sarah reviewed the custody papers Vanessa had given her, she was struck by how professional and legitimate they looked. If she hadn't known better, she might have believed they were standard legal documents instead of the final step in an elaborate criminal scheme. Her phone rang with a call from an unknown number, and Sarah's heart leaped when she heard David's voice. Sarah, thank God. Are you safe? David, where are you? Are you okay? I'm with federal agents. Sarah, they told me everything. About Vanessa. About what she's been doing to you. About what she was planning to do to both of us. Sarah began crying with relief. David, I thought I'd lost you forever. You almost did, David said, his voice heavy with guilt and regret. Sarah, I am so sorry. I don't know how I could have been so blind, so stupid. She had me convinced that you were the problem, that you were dangerous to our baby. She's a professional, David. This is what she does. The FBI agent showed me files on her other victims. Women just like you. Marriages just like ours. Sarah, I could have gotten you killed. They talked for another hour, with David explaining how Vanessa's manipulation had worked and Sarah describing the evidence Linda and Kelly had gathered. By the end of the conversation, they had a plan to work together to bring down Vanessa's entire network. But even as Sarah felt hope returning for the first time in months, she couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa was still several steps ahead of them all. The final confrontation was still coming, and Sarah knew that when it arrived, only one of them would walk away victorious. The FBI raid on Vanessa's operation was scheduled for dawn on Monday morning, but at 3 a.m. on Sunday, Sarah woke to the sound of breaking glass downstairs in Kelly's house. Her sister was at FBI headquarters coordinating the operation. leaving Sarah alone with only the ankle monitor and a security system that had apparently been bypassed. Sarah lay perfectly still in bed, listening to the careful footsteps moving through the house below. Her phone was charging on the nightstand just out of reach, and she realized with growing terror that she was trapped in the guest room with no way to call for help. The footsteps were climbing the stairs now, slow and deliberate, as if the intruder wanted Sarah to hear them coming. Sarah managed to reach her phone and dial 911, but before she could speak, her bedroom door opened to reveal Vanessa silhouetted in the doorway. "Hang up the phone, Sarah," Vanessa said calmly, "or I'll have to hurt you before we finish our conversation." In the dim light from the hallway, Sarah could see that Vanessa was holding something that looked like a syringe. "What do you want?" Sarah whispered, ending the 911 call and hoping the operator would send help based on the open line. "I want to discuss the terms of your departure," Vanessa said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "You see, I've decided that your signature on those custody papers isn't enough anymore. Too many people are asking too many questions." Vanessa moved to the window and drew the curtains closed, plunging the room into near-total darkness. "The FBI thinks they're so clever," Vanessa continued conversationally, "setting up their little raid for tomorrow morning. But they have no idea how extensive our network really is. We have people inside their organization. Sarah. We've known about their plans for days." Sarah's heart sank as she realized that their entire operation had been compromised from the beginning. "David's little rescue fantasy was particularly touching," Vanessa said, settling into the chair by the window. "He really thought he was being a hero, turning against me to save his beloved wife. Such a romantic notion." "What did you do to him?" Sarah demanded, her protective instincts overriding her fear. "David is fine. For now, he's been given a sedative that will keep him unconscious for the next 12 hours or so. Long enough for what needs to happen here." Vanessa held up the syringe so Sarah could see it clearly. "This contains a very interesting compound," Vanessa explained. "When injected into a pregnant woman, it causes what appears to be a completely natural miscarriage. Tragic, but not uncommon, especially in women experiencing high levels of stress." Sarah's hands moved protectively to her belly. "You're talking about murdering my baby." "I'm talking about solving a problem," Vanessa corrected. "You see, Sarah, even if we eliminated you, that baby would still be a complication. David would insist on raising his daughter, and children ask inconvenient questions as they grow older. Much simpler if there's no baby to complicate things." The casual way Vanessa discussed murdering an unborn child was so chilling that Sarah felt something inside her snap. The fear that had been paralyzing her for months transformed into a rage so pure and focused that it burned away every other emotion. "You're not touching my baby," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. Vanessa laughed, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "Sarah, you're hardly in a position to stop me. In about 30 minutes, you're going to have a tragic miscarriage brought on by the stress of recent events. David will be devastated, of course, but I'll be there to comfort him through his grief. And then what you kill him too when he stops being useful. David will live as long as he remains cooperative," Vanessa said with a shrug. "He's actually quite manageable when properly motivated. Men are so much easier to control than women. They think with their egos instead of their brains." Vanessa stood up and moved toward the bed, syringe in hand. "I want you to know that I don't take any pleasure in this," she said, echoing her words from the restaurant. "But you forced this situation by refusing to disappear quietly. If you had just signed the papers and left town, we could have arranged a nice car accident in a few months and everyone would have been satisfied." Sarah realized that Vanessa was confessing to murder, not just her planned murder, but previous ones as well. "How many?" Sarah asked. "How many women have you killed?" "Personally, only 3, but the organization has been responsible for many more. It's really quite efficient when people refuse to cooperate." Vanessa was close enough now that Sarah could smell her expensive perfume. In the dim light, she looked like a beautiful angel of death preparing to destroy everything Sarah loved. "Any last words?" Vanessa asked, raising the syringe. Yes, Sarah said, her hand closing around the heavy glass water bottle on her nightstand. Go to hell! Sarah swung the bottle with every ounce of strength she possessed, connecting with Vanessa's temple and sending her stumbling backward. The syringe flew across the room and shattered against the wall. Vanessa recovered quickly, revealing the athletic grace that Sarah had never noticed before. As they struggled in the darkness, Sarah realized that her opponent was far stronger and more experienced in violence than her sweet demeanor had suggested. You stupid bitch, Vanessa snarled, all pretense of civility abandoned. All you had to do was disappear quietly. Sarah fought with the desperate strength of a mother protecting her young, but Vanessa's training was evident in every move. Just as Sarah felt herself weakening, the bedroom door burst open and Kelly appeared with her service weapon drawn. FBI, step away from my sister. Vanessa froze, calculating her options before slowly raising her hands in surrender. Agent Kelly Mitchell, Vanessa said, her sweet smile returning as if a switch had been flipped. I was just checking on Sarah. She called me in distress. Worried about someone breaking into the house? Save it, Kelly said, moving to secure Vanessa with handcuffs. We heard everything through Sarah's phone. The 911 operator kept the line open. As Kelly arrested Vanessa, reading her rights with professional efficiency, Sarah felt her knees give out. The adrenaline that had carried her through the fight was fading, leaving her shaking and nauseous. The baby, Sarah gasped. Kelly, I need to get to the hospital. The stress, the fight. Ambulance is already on the way, Kelly assured her. Just breathe, Sarah. You did it. You stopped her. As the paramedics arrived and began checking Sarah's vital signs and the baby's heartbeat, Sarah watched Vanessa being led away in handcuffs. Even in custody, Vanessa maintained her composure, looking more annoyed than worried about her arrest. This isn't over, Vanessa called out as she was put into the police car. You have no idea how deep this goes or how many people you're dealing with. The threat sent chills down Sarah's spine, but Kelly's response was swift and confident. We know exactly how deep it goes, Kelly said. And we're coming for all of them. At the hospital, Dr. Williams confirmed that both Sarah and the baby were fine, though he recommended close monitoring for the remainder of her pregnancy. Sarah, he said privately, I want you to know that I never believed you were the person they said you were. Something about the whole situation never felt right to me. David arrived at the hospital still groggy from whatever Vanessa had given him, but alert enough to hold Sarah and apologize over and over for his role in the nightmare. I should have trusted you, he said, tears streaming down his face. My own wife, and I chose to believe a stranger over you. She's a professional manipulator, Sarah replied, stroking his hair. She knew exactly how to exploit every weakness, every insecurity. The important thing is that we're all safe now. But even as Sarah spoke the words, she couldn't shake Vanessa's warning about how extensive their network was. The FBI had arrested Vanessa and several of her immediate associates, but Sarah suspected that the organization she had been part of was like a hydra cut off one head, and two more would grow back. Over the next few days, as Sarah recovered from her ordeal and prepared for the legal battles ahead, she began to understand the true scope of what they had uncovered. Vanessa's arrest had led to a massive investigation involving multiple law enforcement agencies and dozens of victims across the country. But it also led to threats and intimidation attempts from associates who had not yet been caught. Sarah and David were placed in protective custody, and Kelly warned them that it might be months or even years before they could resume normal lives. The important thing, Kelly said during one of their security briefings, is that we broke the back of their operation. Vanessa was their best identity thief, and with her in custody, they're going to have a much harder time recruiting new victims. Sarah placed her hands on her belly, feeling the baby move restlessly as if sensing the continued danger around them. When will it be over? She asked. When we've caught them all, Kelly replied grimly. However long that takes. 3 weeks later, Sarah was awakened by Kelly's urgent voice outside her protected safe house bedroom. Sarah, you need to see this. Now. Sarah hurried to the living room where Kelly had the television tuned to a breaking news report that made her blood run cold. We're receiving reports that Vanessa Chen, the woman at the center of the multi-state identity theft ring, has escaped from federal custody during a routine transport to court, the reporter was saying. She should be considered extremely dangerous, and authorities are warning that she may attempt to contact previous victims. Sarah felt the baby kick hard as her stress levels spiked again. After everything they had been through, after all the evidence they had gathered and the justice they thought they had achieved, Vanessa was free again. How is that possible? Sarah asked. Kelly's expression was grim. The same way she's accomplished everything else. She had help from the inside. As Sarah processed the devastating news that her tormentor was free and undoubtedly seeking revenge, she realized that the nightmare she thought was ending was actually just beginning a new and more dangerous phase. The baby kicked again, and Sarah whispered the promise she had been making for months. Mommy's going to protect you, no matter what it takes. But this time, Sarah knew that whatever it takes might mean spending the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, waiting for Vanessa to strike again. 3 months after giving birth to her daughter Emma, Sarah stood in the kitchen of her new home, a secure house in a different state with a new identity provided by the FBI's Witness Protection Program. The morning sun streamed through bulletproof windows as she prepared breakfast for David, who was getting ready for his new job at a local construction company. Life under new identities wasn't easy, but it was peaceful in a way that Sarah had almost forgotten was possible. Emma was healthy and beautiful, with David's dark hair and Sarah's stubborn chin. Most importantly, she was safe. Morning, beautiful, David said, kissing Sarah's cheek as he reached for his coffee. How did our little princess sleep like a baby? Sarah replied with a smile. Which is to say, not much, but at least she's consistent about it. David laughed, and the sound filled Sarah with warmth. Her husband had changed during their ordeal, becoming more attentive, more appreciative of the simple moments they had together. The trauma had nearly destroyed their marriage, but ultimately it had made them stronger. Kelly visited whenever she could, bringing updates on the ongoing investigation and news about the other victims who had found the courage to come forward. Linda Harrison had testified before Congress about identity theft networks, leading to new legislation designed to protect vulnerable women. Jennifer Walsh had reopened her family's restaurant, and Michelle Santos had regained custody of her children. Vanessa's escape led to the biggest breakthrough we could have hoped for, Kelly explained during her most recent visit. She contacted several members of her network, not knowing that we had them under surveillance. We've arrested 15 more people in the last month alone. But Vanessa herself remained at large, despite a massive manhunt that had followed her escape. Sarah tried not to think about it, but late at night when Emma was sleeping and David was at work, she sometimes found herself checking locks and listening to every sound outside their carefully secured home. Sarah had started writing about her experience, initially as therapy, but increasingly as a way to help other women recognize the warning signs of professional manipulation. Her manuscript was almost complete, and her FBI-approved literary agent believed it could help prevent other families from experiencing what theirs had endured. You're giving other women their voices back, David said when Sarah expressed doubts about sharing such personal details of their ordeal. Vanessa's power came from secrecy and shame. Your book destroys both of those. On a Tuesday morning in September, exactly 1 year after Vanessa had first appeared in their lives, Sarah received a call that changed everything. Sarah! Kelly's voice was tight with excitement. We got her! Vanessa's in custody! The arrest had happened in Miami, where Vanessa had been attempting to establish a new identity with forged documents. A bank employee who had seen Sarah's story on the news recognized Vanessa's methods and contacted the FBI. She's looking at life in prison without parole, Kelly continued. Multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. She's never getting out. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. For the first time in over a year, she could imagine a future where she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder. The trial was set for the following spring, and Sarah would need to testify. But the evidence against Vanessa was so overwhelming that her conviction was essentially guaranteed. "What about the rest of her network?" Sarah asked. "Still working on it, but we've dismantled the major operations. There might be some smaller players still out there, but the organization, as Vanessa knew it, is finished." That evening, Sarah and David celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, Emma sleeping peacefully in her bassinet nearby. As they toasted with sparkling cider, Sarah felt genuinely hopeful about their future for the first time since the nightmare began. "To new beginnings," David said, raising his glass. "To family," Sarah replied. 6 months later, Sarah's book, Stolen: How I Reclaimed My Identity from a Master Manipulator, became a bestseller, praised for its unflinching honesty and practical advice for other victims. The success led to speaking engagements and consulting work with law enforcement agencies, developing better protocols for identity theft cases. Sarah had found her purpose in helping other women, and David had discovered that he preferred the honest work of construction to the questionable dealings that had made him vulnerable to Vanessa's manipulation in the first place. Emma was walking now, filling their home with laughter and the particular chaos that only a determined toddler could create. Sarah marveled daily at how perfect their daughter was, how completely she embodied the